Hello, fierce ones! Welcome to our conversation series, The Fierce, Fun, and Fantastic Women Among Us, usually happening monthly on the fourth Fridays of the month. You may have noticed I took a little bit of a hiatus over the winter, setting up my new space, but we're back, and we are spotlighting women and men living their most wonderful lives. As you know, we connect with leaders and visionaries and wisdom keepers who learn about their fierce awakenings and how they are expressing their unique gifts in the world. I'm Jenn Baljko, founder of Always on My Way and the moderator of the Fierce Awakened Woman Facebook group. And today I'm chatting with Wendy Battles. Hi, Wendy.
Hey, Jenn. I am so excited to be here with you and to have this conversation today. So thank you for this invite.
Thank you for saying yes. And
Absolutely.
before we dive in, because we have a lot of juicy things to talk about, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Wendy and her amazing story of reinvention. Hang on to that word because it's coming back. But Wendy Battles is a cybersecurity awareness expert at Yale University by day and pursues her passion for celebrating, illuminating, and elevating older women by night. Wendy is the host of the Reinvention Rebels podcast, which is reinventionrebels.com. She interviews bold and unapologetic women, 50 to 90 years young, who have reinvented themselves later in life to see new possibilities. From traveling solo around the world with a carry-on bag at 60, to penning and publishing the first novel at 62, to launching a modeling career at 72, these women are bravely making their dreams a priority. And Wendy shines a light on the notion that we can reinvent ourselves at any age and at any stage. At 57, Wendy is a reinvention rebel herself, and she has reinvented herself as a management consultant, a voice actor, and a health coach. Her most recent reinvention as a podcast host is her most rewarding. She's learned the art of living on purpose and embracing life with more joy, ease, and trust. Just on a little personal note, I feel Wendy as a kindred spirit. Our paths are now connected because of our mutual friend, Amy Keach, powerhouse in her own right. And she was also one of the first people interviewed for this series. So you'll see for yourself in a moment of how Wendy is just embracing all of this, calling herself a joy spreader. Love that. And how she's managed through a lot of different pivots in her own life. So welcome again, Wendy. So nice to
you,
see you.
Jenn.
So nice to have you.
I'm so excited.
I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to start with the show me or tell me how fierce awakenings have shown up in your life. Like, I know you've gone through some big pivots. So tell me about a couple of them.
I will say this to preface our conversation, that in 1997, I ended up having some surgery. So I was out of work for 6 weeks recovering. And I have these moments in my life where I like to be introspective. I like to kind of noodle on things. And I remember I wrote down my mission, which was to teach, speak, motivate, and inspire. I didn't know what that meant at the time. And I think one of my reinventions back then is that I'd become a voice actor and I was using my voice in that way. But one of the things I think that's interesting is I step back and I think about my life, and I know that sometimes things happen to us and they don't work out the way we want. We can be disappointed and we have our heart set on something. And then when it doesn't work out, we're like, what? It's really sometimes hard to take. And what I find really interesting now that I'm at a place where I feel like I've really stepped into my purpose is that the my steps along the way on this self-awareness journey, this introspection journey, have really landed me where I am now. And I can see now how all these puzzle pieces fit together, that some things that worked out or some things that didn't work out were all part of this larger plan for me to really step into what I feel like I'm meant to do. And to get that perspective, to be able to see that now, that even though it didn't always work out for me to do the voiceovers, or I gave up maybe too easily, or it seemed like back in the 90s, it was a lot of men that were famous doing voiceovers and it was hard to find work. And I got frustrated and I stopped. But I think that all this voice training was part of this bigger plan of becoming a podcast host, which of course I couldn't see back then.
No, no, isn't it curious, like the cumulative effect of these stepping stones that
Yes.
sometime you can go back and go, oh yeah, if I didn't do that, I would not have done that, and I wouldn't have done this, and then I wouldn't have met this person, and that wouldn't have happened. And then, but you don't see it. You don't see it when you're in the small view of life, right? You're kind of
Sure
like,
don't.
what is this big picture? What is this thing? And I know you've talked about it just on your podcast, which by the way is just so amazing in spotlighting, like in putting a pro-aging spin on life, because women like us, we're running the world. We just haven't told everybody that yet.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
We so are.
But how did you get there? Because I know you talked about it. You went to be a health coach at some point.
I did. So I do feel like sometimes I've been motivated by things not going well in my life to get me into action. And in the mid 2000s, I was just trying to kind of figure out, like I have many times, what am I meant to do? I've had this burning question for years, since my 30s. What am I really meant to do? And even though I've been really successful in everything I've done, I always felt like something was missing. And I would look at people, I bet people who knew from an early age, I'm going to be this or I'm going to do that. And it just seemed like they just knew. And I just didn't know. Even in college, I changed my major 8 times. Like I couldn't decide. I was always very undecided, unsure, like, what are the things I'm good at? What should I do? So I would fall into things and I would just kind of go with it because I was good at them. But underlying all that, I still kept thinking, like, what's missing? So in 2005, my dad had passed away the year before. I was just kind of grieving and thinking about life, and I had a corporate job. I am not a corporate person. And I think it's great that people can shine in the corporate world. It's just not my thing. So I was searching and I was onto this idea of public health. Like I went to a career coach who was helping me, big into hiring coaches to help me kind of get perspective and figure things out, right? Like I have no problem paying someone to help me figure out my life and, or just coach me along the way. So I got on this idea of, I wanted to be of service. So I think that's part of what is a common theme for me and everything I've done is to try to be of service to other people in some way. And I got onto this idea of public health, that I wanted to be able to, in some way, try to influence outcomes or help change, especially in communities of color where there are just chronic problems for lots of different reasons. Anyway, but then I thought, well, going to a public health program, a master's program, I don't want to quit my job. I'm not going to go full time at 40 something. And I got on the idea, and then I didn't want it to take forever though. I already had another master's. I don't want to be like 4 or 5 years to get this master's degree going part-time. So I got on the idea of nutrition. I've always been interested in nutrition. I have gone to nutritionists because, I like having people help me. And so I ended up getting a certificate in nutrition. I said, I'm going to become a health coach. I quit my job, which I really hadn't planned out, which I don't really recommend that, but I'd like to live in the moment sometimes. Maybe it's not the best idea. So I started doing that, but I have to be honest with you, Jen, it, it wasn't my calling. And I do really enjoy coaching people, but I like to do it for fun. I like to coach my friends and family. I don't like doing it as a business. I just always felt like something was missing, but I quit my job, so I felt like I got to try really hard. And so I tried and I put all this effort in, and I tried to make things happen. And I just it wasn't for me. And so I did it for a few years. I ultimately, ended up getting a job, which was a much better fit at Yale, which went from part-time to full-time. And so that was definitely one of my reinventions, but it wasn't one of my, I feel like, successful reinventions. Although I guess if we go back and we say that everything we do, there's meaning to it. There's a lesson in it. Even if it's not what we're meant to do or what we want to do, that's still information that I think is helpful. And I think that those were, again, stepping stones along the way that led me to my recent and best reinvention.
But I really appreciate that you're acknowledging that sometimes we have to just make a choice and kind of follow what we think is the way to go, only to go through the process of realizing, oh, that wasn't the process, that wasn't where I was going. And it's not that you necessarily moved backwards by doing it. There was something that came from that experience that needed to, I guess, spiral you upwards. That's how I see some of these wrong turns or detours, right? Because they're not wrong turns, they're just the detour that you needed to take because something else needed to happen. So
Yes,
it
totally.
feels like that. It feels like going the hell, like you had to test it out, because if you didn't test it out, maybe you would have woken up and said, oh, I really wish I would have tried that at some point.
Exactly. Exactly. And I don't want to live with regrets. I think it's better that we try it, and sometimes we fail, but so what? Like there's so many, as you said, lessons in failure or it not going the way we anticipate or wanted to that are still so valuable if we're willing to lean in and listen and pay attention. I think that's part of the key.
Right.
We can also sometimes be like, whatever, I'm going to just keep that over there and compartmentalize it and maybe try to forget that happened. And I'm trying to really embrace all of the things, the good, the bad, and everything in between, as just where I'm meant to be, wherever that is in my life.
In that moment, right? Like in this
Yes,
phase
in
of
that
life,
moment.
this is what you heard and this is what you followed. And curiously, the wind whispered to you again, right?
It did. It did. And
That
it's
was the story. I
interesting.
love your story of how Reinvention Rebels was even,
Me
as it came as an idea, literally like whispered to the wind.
too. Literally. And it's interesting because, again, I think everything happens for a reason, even though we can't always see it in the moment. But someone had asked me to be on a panel at Yale that was about personal branding. And this was in the fall of 2019. And now, mind you, I'd stopped coaching in 2014. I was working full time. I still had that twinge of, I know there's something more I'm meant to do. And while I like my job, like I still feel like something is missing. I'm now, in my 50s thinking, when am I going to figure this out? Like, hurry up and figure this out, Wendy. I don't want it to be forever. I don't want to be 75 and figuring it out. Ideally, I'd like to do it now. So because I've been asked to be on this panel, I started researching about personal branding. It'd been a while since I'd done a lot of that with my business, so I was a little rusty. I started listening to a podcast, as I often do, and this podcast was called Package Your Genius. First of all, I just love the name and just the idea, like packaging, like the premise is there's something that you shine at. There's something that Jen shines at. There's something that everyone in Jen's audience shines at. Maybe we don't know what it is yet. Maybe we haven't been able to put all the things together. But when you can figure out what that thing is, you can step into that space with more ease and more trust. And I was so excited about this idea that I bought this woman's book and I started going through it. There are all these questions she asked. What did you love doing when you were little? What gives you energy? What are the things that bring you joy? I mean, all the kind of questions, Jen, that you probably have asked yourself, being the self-aware person that you are, right? To get to where you are.
Of course.
right?
These
So
questions keep repeating. Like, what did I really like to do? What is it, the thing that I shine? What is it? What?
yeah, and those questions spurred me. Like I started to think, well, I even though I didn't love being a health coach, I loved working with women. And I love the idea of seeing women succeed. And being that I was now a middle-aged woman, I thought I'd like to see middle-aged women be more visible and really appreciating themselves more. So I just started writing down these little ideas, and I do a lot of meditation. One day I was meditating and I literally heard Reinvention Rebels. And I was like, what? Reinvention Rebels. And I thought, I don't know, I didn't even know what it was. I just said, something told me I should write this down. Just,
Like, just stop meditation for a moment, write it down, get it all
yes.
deeper, because it might leave, it might fly away.
And that's what happens. Sometimes like in the middle of the night, I wake up and I have this idea. And I said, I'm going to remember that. But in the morning, I don't know what the heck it was.
No clue.
And so I literally wrote down Reinvention Rebels and just had it on a piece of paper. And I just continued to just be like really quiet. And I got in the habit of like doing the dishes in quiet, cooking in quiet, like no music or TV or anything else in the background, just kind of being with my thoughts. And that's how it really, I feel like the wisdom just kind of bubbled up by giving myself permission to just like allow it really to come into being, is how I would describe it.
And how did you decide that it was actually something you were going to do?
That's such a great question, because I do remember thinking that I always liked listening to podcasts. And I remember at one point thinking, I love podcasts, but I could never be a podcast host. I don't have anything to talk about. And I think that was back before I had clarity. But one day it just came to me. It's so weird. And I think because I was starting to like refresh my voiceover career, and I recorded a new demo, and I had started down this path of, trying to start marketing myself, but it just wasn't what I wanted. Like, I just didn't feel it. I thought, I don't want to just read ads for companies. And there is nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't, I just didn't feel inspired by it though. I didn't feel moved by it. I thought, I think that there's something else I can do with my voice to be of service. And I don't know what it is, but that's what I leaned into. And one day it just bubbled up for me that it was a podcast, that's what Reinvention Rebels was. And all I can say is that I think that when we give ourselves permission, and when we have intention, and when we put it out there, all these things show up to support us. And I imagine that you probably have had a similar experience and have felt that. But literally, I said, it's a podcast, and I started telling everyone I ran into, even though I didn't know anything about producing a podcast. I started telling people, I'm going to have a podcast. It's called Reinvention Rebels. And one day I was in a meeting with a colleague, and we ended up on a diversity committee, but somehow everyone else disappeared. It was just us. I was telling him about my dream. He said, "Oh, I'll help you with that." He said, "I could edit it for you." I was like, okay. So just like that, things started to show up, which I think is this idea of trust and ease. Like when you believe that you can do something, when you trust that even though you don't know how it's going to unfold, I don't know, things show up to support our dreams. That's what I believe.
I'm with you. I'm so with you, Wendy. And I think it's because maybe we had to put our dreams aside for a while, right? Like, we were on this career track. We were going to do all these things in the world, and maybe we had too many dreams, or maybe we weren't specific about our dreams. But I do feel like there is something that bubbles up that says, no, this is yours. Like, this is yours, and you own it. Like, this is it. And I like to think that the universe has our back and is kind of giving us that little wink of like, go for it.
Totally. I totally am with you on that. Yes.
But I sometimes wonder also if I'm in overachiever mode, like in just hurrying up to get to the next summit, hurrying up to get to the next, like, wow, I did that. Okay, now I'll get to the next mountain if I did this one already, right? Have you been able to distinguish what is like your ego's need for fulfillment and achievement, and really kind of getting into, no, this is like soul, spirit, heart level stuff?
I have. And I have to say that at 57, this is the first time I believe ever, that I feel like I'm truly living on purpose, and I'm doing what I'm doing from this place of deep joy. And while it is work, of course, producing a podcast is work, just like producing your show is work, right? It's not like it just does it by itself and you have to expend effort and take action, but it's so joyful that I can't wait to do it. So I think before I was motivated by, I have to do this and I need to do this, to do this, to do this. And if I just like try really hard and try to make things happen, and it was all of this like effort and mental energy to try to, make something happen, where this is from a very different perspective of just knowing that this is what I meant to do, and coming from it from a perspective of so much more freedom and joy, and appreciating that I don't need to know the answers. And sometimes I do get in that space of like, if I just do these three more things, but I just know that this is what I meant to do. I just have this knowing about it, that it's unfolding. And every time I want to say I want to do something, something else happens that supports that in like this magical way. So I think what I've learned is that I don't have to try so hard. That we can still have ambition and desires and things we want to do and be in the world. But I think that when we're doing it from this place of being of service to other people in a joyful way, it can happen with so much more ease than before when I was trying so hard. Now I don't have to try so hard. It just like it, I don't know, things have just opened up in this amazing way. So less of that I used to do before, and just more, huh. And I don't know what that means in terms of my ego, but I guess it's just led from, I feel like it's soul led.
Yeah, I think there's like as soon as you tune into that, it's hard to put the words around that. No, this is not like an achievement thing. Like an achievement thing was like getting that prize when I was 30, or being named, I don't know, like reporter of the year, or like something like that, where I had a
Yes.
certificate and an award that said I was worthy, right? But now it's like,
Yes.
no, I have a sign right here that says, do joyful work.
Yes.
That's it. Just come to life with the intention of doing joyful work. And it feels really different. It feels fantastic in that space. And
Yeah.
I
I
really
totally
love that
agree.
too. So, what advice do you have for those of us still pivoting and reinventing? And um, how do we reinvent ourselves? How do, like, what have you been experiencing as you're talking to women? What are some of the common threads you're seeing?
There are so many common threads. One of them is curiosity. Curiosity. The women that I interviewed, these amazing women that have reinvented themselves in such interesting and very different ways. One common thread is that they are so curious. They all are curious. They're curious about themselves. They're curious about the world around them, whether it's in a local way or it's in a larger way, but they are curious about what they could do and be. And I think they've also have given themselves permission. That's another theme I've seen, is this idea of self permission, that they're giving themselves permission to lean into, to explore, and then to lean into those things that light them up. Because I think so often as women, especially as we age, whether you've had kids or not, you're married or not, it doesn't matter. We all, I think, as women have felt like there are things we have to do, people we're responsible for, certain expectations we want to meet. Women just hate to disappoint people. We want to do everything right. And I think that sometimes stops us from leaning into more joy or doing the things that really interest or inspire us. And these are women that have given themselves permission to say, okay, I want to try something different. And I have no idea what it is, but I'm willing to be open to try things and see. And what a great example is Natalie, who traveled around the world by herself when she was 60 with like a carry-on bag, and never traveled alone before. She came back, and then she's about to move to Portugal, in fact, which is where I want to retire. She's going to retire to Portugal later this year. And she came back and said, well, I'm really interested in bourbon. And she pitched a 12-week apprenticeship to a bourbon distillery where she lives in Cleveland. And they were like So excited. She became an intern. Then she started filling in different ways. I mean, it was just amazing. Just something that she just enjoyed. And she said, what if I explored this? What if I, so it doesn't, I don't think it always has to be, there has to be a prescribed job or something like that. Like, what if we were open enough to put ourselves out there and just dabble in a fun way? And that's such a great example of something that was really fun
Right.
that she explored. And so I think that idea of, curiosity, self-permission, and beginning to trust ourselves, self-trust, I think is the other thing I would say, that these women are beginning to like look inside and trust those instincts, just like you and I are doing. You're beginning to trust themselves. And that's, to me, is very powerful, because I think often we second guess ourselves, or we're not sure, or we look to someone else for validation. And this is all about, well, this is what I want, and I trust that that's going to be the right thing, even if I don't know how. And I think that's also the other thing, is like not worrying so much about the how. If you kind of figure out this is something I love, just like with podcasting, I didn't know a thing about podcasting. I didn't know a thing about podcasting. I did not know how much work it is to podcast. But I just said, I'm going to just figure out how to do it one step at a time. And what I thought I was going to start in like 3 months took me a year, but that was okay. So
And now you're in your third season,
I'm
right?
in my third season, and now I'm getting, now I'm getting, I'm really, I think one of the things that they say about podcasters is that there's something called pod fade. And often, like, a huge percentage of people don't get past like 7 or 10 episodes. And I'm so committed, though. Like, I just love it so much, maybe because I love to talk, but I just love, talking and listening, and right, hearing these stories, that I've now figured out how to do it consistently, with more ease and less stress. So it's, evolving.
Well, and I think that touches on the good point also of, yeah, you could put yourself out there and say, I'm going to go try this. But there does take a certain amount of endurance and consistency and staying power. Like, but it also is knowing that it's not for you too, right? Knowing when to keep moving and trusting yourself that this is going somewhere. And like with the health coaching thing, oh, okay, that wasn't really it. And I know I can go somewhere else, right? There's this
Yeah.
essence of a choice that's in that, right? And that you're waking up. What are you waking up at? Like 4:45 every morning now to
Yeah.
like
To
do
do
all
my thing.
stuff, to do your thing. But
Yeah.
you're making the time of that, right? You could easily say, no, I'm going to stay in bed until 7 and then get to work, and I'll just do it on the weekend. But there is a certain amount of devotion and commitment. I know you talk about the commitment part too, of that has to be part of the reinvention, right? You have to be committed
You
and
do.
jump in and see where
Yeah.
it's heading.
You really do. And I think that that's where the consistency comes in, because, I think that we live in this world where everybody wants everything immediately. And I think what's interesting, Jen, is that whole experience of being a health coach, and sort of running a business, which I really didn't do successfully, was amazing for me, because when I was doing that, for some reason, I thought I was going to be instantly successful. I don't know why. I was just like, I don't know. All of a sudden, and maybe because at the nutrition school, they made it sound like, oh, these people are so successful so easily. And I thought, well, why wouldn't I be the same thing? And I really wasn't. And I think that was like really frustrating. But part of what I see now and what I understand is that to create something of value and something that's lasting takes patience. It takes time. It is not realistic to think that no matter what our dream is or what it is we want to do, how we want to reinvent ourselves, that we're going to do it overnight and be instantly successful. And so that experience that wasn't successful then has helped me realize that I'm just chipping away. So every time I'm making strides and I'm connecting with people and I'm creating like really fantastic episodes, it's all, these baby steps forward, doing it really consistently. So that's that commitment that you mentioned, that I think is so important for any of us. And, it obviously, everyone's reinvention is different. Everyone's idea of commitment is different. Just because I get up at 4:45 every day, it's because I have a full-time job, right? So I got to squeeze it in. and I'm best in the mornings, it doesn't mean everyone else has to do the same thing. I just think it's important for each of us to figure out what is our groove, what works for us. How can we all be consistent in our own way? So just kind of leaning in, listening, kind of figuring out what will work for me in my world and the way I'm reinventing myself.
Words to live by, Wendy. Words to live by. Any other words that that you want to share with us before we wrap up and send people off into their joy journeys and fierce awakenings and reinvention rebels selves that they are going to be?
It's never too late. The piece of advice I would share, or the wisdom, is it's never ever too late, which is exemplified by these women I interview. And someone that's coming up is 71 and she runs marathons around the world, but she didn't start running. For the first time, she started running at 55. This is someone that had a lifelong weight problem, who was, when I knew her before, was really heavy, who discovered at 55 running and found such immense joy, found community. And then when she started doing it, like the weight just kind of just went away because she found something that really inspired her. So I really believe it's never ever too late. We can always reinvent ourselves. It doesn't matter whether we're in our 70s or 80s, 50s, whatever. It's always possible to create something new and different. And I think that's like the biggest thing that I've learned about myself, and also through interviewing these women, is that it's never ever too late and we are never too old.
That's right.
We can do it. We can do it,
We can
Jen.
do it. We can do it. It's
Yeah,
true. And that is, we're always, well, and we're 50 years young, 60 years young, 70 years young, right? Reconnecting
exactly.
with all this stuff that we've wanted to do. And we have to. We have to do it. We just have to get out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that when we can hear and see stories of people our age or older that are doing it, it reminds us that we can do it too. And my reinvention is not going to be Mary's reinvention. I've got bad creaky knees. I'm not going to be a runner. I'm not going to be running marathons around the world, but I've got my own thing I'm doing and have reinvented myself. And each of us has the ability to uncover and lean into whatever that thing is. And I think that's the joy of it. That's going back to the idea of packaging your genius, right? There's something that you shine at in a way that nobody else can do it the way you do it, Jen. Nobody else can have this fierce awakening platform the way you do.
That's right. And the same with the Reinvention Rebels. Like, it had to come to you like this so that you could step into it, right? Like, you just took that very next step. And there is that courage there, right? And the courage is just a little
Yes.
bit more than the fear of failure, so that you could go do it. And you do it. You're broadcasting now every 2 weeks, right? Every other
Yeah.
week.
Every other week.
Every other
You
week.
got
You've got a
it.
schedule. You're finding all these amazing women. I'm sure you're finding too that they're also just coming into your space, right? Like you
Yeah,
said,
absolutely.
you open yourself up to it, and there things appear.
It's amazing how that happens. It's like, what? What? I love it. Like how people just show up in just these amazing ways. So, yes, I think that we can all kind of figure out whatever that thing is. And you know what? It does sometimes, it takes a lot of deep reflection to figure it out. It's not all, because I think that's the listening, right? That I believe we all have such deep wisdom within us, but we're often so busy
Right.
running around that we can't hear it, that we're not tuned in. And I think, to me, that's like one of the key things, is slowing down, getting more quiet, tuning in. I believe we all have the answers within us, but we have to have that ability to listen for that to
Right.
help us.
And I sometimes feel like I'm a sound engineer, with my life. Like, is it my mind
Yes.
talking to me? Is it my body talking to me? Is it the soul talking to me? Is it the heart talking to me? Like, let me see how I could make it feel like a harmony, like that I'm just creating harmony with all of these things. But it comes from the listening, it comes from the pausing and the stillness, so that we could be more active and climb out there and
Yeah, exactly. One last thing I'll say is that I was thinking when I was started in my 50s, I thought, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know where I could show. I mean, yes, I'm good at my work stuff. I get that.
Right.
But in terms of other things, right, in this
Right.
larger mission. And I didn't feel confident about, even though I'm an overall confident person, I didn't feel confident about using my voice in a way that felt empowered. I feel like, I kept thinking, I feel like I've got something to say, but I don't know how I could say it. I don't know in what way. And when this unfolded, I think the thing I noticed is that I felt so fearless. Like I knew this was right because I've never felt so sure about anything in my life that, and that is such a great feeling to feel like, I've arrived, but I've arrived within myself, not arrived in the outward world in that way, but that for me, like I've arrived and I've awakened to, this amazing thing that I feel like I can do with such joy and without the fear that I had before. Like, oh, what if someone gets upset, or what if now it's like, who cares? Like I'm just living on purpose, speaking my truth, and it doesn't even matter.
That. Yep. That. Right there. That.
Yeah.
The speaking your truth, the showing up for yourself, the showing up in service with joy in your heart. That seems
I
like a
love
recipe
it.
of something magical for sure.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. And I think that those things that we're talking about, any of us can experience it. So even if you're watching this, you're thinking, well, oh, Wendy and Jen can do that, but I can't do that. Well, that's what I used to think too. Like I just, it's just a matter of figuring it out. And even if you don't know it yet, we all have the ability, I think, to figure it out. If we can lean in and be patient with ourselves, we can all get to that place that's our own version of that.
Well, and it feels like this is like the maybe something we could end with here is there's this old writing analogy, and I don't even remember who said it, and I've heard it so many different times I don't even know the source of it now. But when you write a novel or write a book, it's like driving at night with your headlights on. You can only see this much in front of you. And it's the same with the reinvention and with life. We don't know. We have no idea how we can see everything. There's no way to see everything. But you can drive the whole way to the destination by just seeing what's right in front of you and shining a light right there. And then just going a couple extra miles, right? Like, just keep going a couple extra miles and see what else is in front of you. See what else is in front of you. See what else is in front of you. And you can do it. You can do hard things. And you can do things like this with ease and trust and grace and joy.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes to everything you just said. And I think that's the thing. It doesn't have to be so hard.
Right?
I think we needlessly make things harder than they have to be. And maybe it's because we don't trust ourselves, or we don't have that knowing. But when you can step into that thing, it's like, oh, I can live with so much more ease. And it's so much more joyful to not be in my head all the time, so worried about everything like I was before. So yes, to that flashlight, to that light, that shining that light a little, just and taking it one step at a time. I am right there with you, Jen, 100%. Baby steps, right? To shine that light and take
And
steps forward.
we all know, like, the baby steps. We all want to take that giant leap and have us land much further away than the baby step will take us. But yeah, they're usually just small incremental steps that just, I'm showing up today, I'm doing this one thing. I'm showing up today, I'm doing this one thing. I'm going to do the next thing, and then I'm going to do the thing after that. And then, suddenly you're in season 3 of a podcast, for instance, right?
Right. And then you're like, what? How did this happen? But, and then you realize I'm doing it. And I think that's like the best part of all, when we get in that flow and just trying to, and it doesn't mean that we don't have our moments when we're like, oh my gosh, because of course, who doesn't?
Of course.
Right? We're human.
Of course, there's still that, there's still
Yeah.
that.
But less of that.
Wendy, tell people where they can find you and how to tune in.
You can find me everywhere. Really, you can go to reinventionrebels.com, which is my website, but also if you are a podcast listener, you can go to your platform of choice, Apple, Spotify, Google, you name it, and you will find me there in all these different ways. And then, of course, on social media, I'm on Instagram, Reinvention Rebels, Twitter, Facebook, again, all the main places. So I look forward to connecting with all of you.
Thank you, Wendy.